Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee this morning. Bore da, croeso i'r cyfarfod fan hyn yn Cyngor y Sir yn Bryn Biga. My name's Tudor Thomas, and I'm Chair of Licensing, and I will obviously chair the proceedings today, and obviously allow people to come in, etc. I'll do the introductions and then we will go to the agenda. I'm Tudor Thomas, Chair of the committee, and I'm a councillor in Abergavenny. Go to...
Bore da, I'm Tony Eason, County Councillor for Dewsbury Ward in Caldecott, member of this committee and a member of the subcommittee this morning.
Okay.
Diolch.
And can we go now then to Councillor Dale Rook on screen?
Good morning, I'm Councillor Dale Rook representing Chepstow Castle and Larkfield wards. And I'm a member of the committee and subcommittee.
Julian.
Thank you. Julian Sanders, Lister, Monmouthshire Council. Thank you.
Wendy Barnard, Democratic Services.
Emma Watkins, Licensing Officer.
Samantha Wynne, Licensing Officer.
Matthew Phipps, I'm from TLT Solicitors. I'm representing the applicant this morning.
Jane Gulliver, personal licence holder and representing the owner of the property.
Nigel Webb, I'm representing myself.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, so let's go through the first two agenda items. Number one, apologies.
There's no apologies, Chair.
No, okay. And secondly, any declaration of interest? No. Dale? No? No. Okay. So we'll go now then to the agenda item 3, and this is the application to vary a premises licence for 57 Bridge Street in Usk. And obviously the reason for today's meeting is that we consider this application to vary the premises licence under the Licensing Act 2003 for 57 Bridge Street, Usk. A copy of the application and the plan has been sent out, and an additional paper was sent out a day or so ago. And there is also a copy of the current premises licence, which is attached as Appendix A. And obviously today we will be considering, the three members, myself and my two councillor colleagues. Once we've heard the evidence today, we've gone through the application and listened to licensing, listened to the applicant and their representative. We will then go into a separate room. That is obviously the three councillors, including myself, and Julian Sanders, who is one of the county solicitors, and then we will deliberate on the application and then come back and give our decision to the committee, and that will be the end of the proceedings, for today. We've obviously considered it. There have been some certain changes from the original application, and as far as I'm aware now, the only thing that we are considering today are the actual licensing hours, how long alcohol can be sold at these particular premises. And there have been objections. One objector is obviously here in person today, and we will listen to the applicant and to the objectors, and obviously the other objectors who are not here, their evidence is there. I'm going to, under the agenda, the sort of regulations that we operate under, normally we allow 10 minutes for people to speak, but if it goes slightly over that, I will not be draconian. I will not stop people as long as it doesn't go into half an hour or whatever. But if you think of 10 minutes, most people can obviously put their point of view within that time. And I will obviously be fair in terms of allowing people to speak, etc., to the applicant and to the objector that is here, and obviously looking at the evidence from the other objectors. I'm going to turn now then firstly to the licensing officers, and they will present their statements of facts, and they will summarise things like the facts of the application before the panel, any objections or representations made by responsible authorities such as the police or the fire service, any representations made by other persons, those sections of the government guidance and licensing policy document applicable in this particular case, and then there'll be a statement of facts and a report which probably will not contain a recommendation, but will actually give us the facts. So I hand over now to Emma Watkins and to Samantha to present the licensing statement. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Can the applicant and the objector confirm that you've received sight of the report and the committee procedure and that you're happy to proceed?
Yes, absolutely. I've had everything in very timely fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to point out...
I did too as well. Yes, I am here. Yeah.
Thank you. And just to point out, there is an error with the numbers on the report. So 3.7 is actually listed twice. So 3.7, and then following that, it should read 3.8, and then so on from there. Thank you.
Right, good morning, everybody. The applicant submitted an application to vary the current licence for 57 Bridge Street on the 19th of December 2024. The application was advertised at the premises, in the local newspaper and on the authority's website. The statutory duty of circulating to the statutory consultees was also carried out. On discussing the application with the applicant, it was noted that the rear outside area of the premises had been missed out of the original plan. Therefore, a new plan was submitted and a 28-day consultation period began again, making the closing date for representations the 12th of February. The report shows at 3.1 the original application that was submitted for live music, an extension to the current recorded music hours, late night refreshment, and an extension of the current alcohol hours, with this now including the rear outside of the premises. Now, representations were received from Gwent Police, which were agreed by the applicant, and you can see those in Appendix C. Now, the conditions that were agreed are standard conditions that the police like to add, and they relate to CCTV, training of staff with regards to Challenge 25, etc. Now, the police also requested a reduction in hours, which was agreed by the applicant and is now shown in 3.7. Environmental Health also submitted representation shown at 3.8, which the applicant agreed to. This reduced the hours for live and recorded music and introduced two conditions in relation to regulated entertainment. For this application, representations were also received from other persons, and they related to noise and possible public nuisance, and they can be seen in Appendix D. Planning was also a concern with regards to the marquee at the rear of the premises, and contact with planning was made, and planning confirmed that permission wasn't required, and this can be seen at 3.9. Now, on the 11th of February, after discussions with the applicant and due to the representations received, the applicant decided to remove from their application live and recorded music. The objectors were informed, and each objector declined to remove their representation. As the representations with regard to the rear outside area, the applicant made another decision to remove the external area on the 12th of February. Again, the objectors were informed, and they declined to withdraw their representations. Therefore, the application put before the committee is now as follows. Sale of alcohol, Sunday to Monday, 10 until 11:30. Thursday to Saturday, 10 until 1:45. Late night refreshment, Sunday to Monday, 11 until midnight. Thursday to Saturday, 11 until 1:45. Opening hours, Sunday to Monday, 9 until midnight, Thursday to Saturday, 9 until 1:15. Now, this application being submitted will now also include the conditions agreed by the police, and they will also include the conditions agreed with Environmental Health. Due to regulated entertainment being withdrawn, this does not now include hours for live and recorded music. As outlined in Appendix E, the following conditions do not come into effect between the hours of 8 and 11. Doors and windows will be kept closed when regulated entertainment takes place, and a noise management plan detailing appropriate controls to prevent unreasonable noise disturbance to nearby properties shall be retained at the premises and shall be reviewed every 12 months. Now, those conditions are being submitted with the application, but as I stated, they do not come into play until between the hours of 8 and 11 p.m. Now, when members are making their decision, they need to be mindful of the 4 key licensing objectives, which are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. When considering the representations made against the applications, members are also asked to consider the licensing objectives issued under the revised guidance, which were brought out in February of this year and are shown at Appendix F. Section 4 outlines the reasons for determining the application, and point 4.5 gives an overview of Monmouthshire's policy on prevention of public nuisance. That's the end of the report.
Right. Well, thank you for that. I think it sets out what the application actually is. It's probably slightly longer because conditions have changed, and you have taken the advice of relevant authorities such as Gwent Police and Environmental Health for Monmouthshire County Council. We'll go now then to the applicants, and as I say, you have approximately 10 minutes, but I won't be draconian on that.
Sorry, yeah. Could I ask a bit of clarity on 3.11, where you say that the open hours are till 0045, yet late night refreshment on the same nights is till 0145.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Can you put your mic on?
I just need to have a look at the application form for that. Is that a typo?
So I can help with that. I hesitate to say to Samantha it's a typo, but it's a typo. It's 1:15, not 1:45.
1:15, right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's...
I'm sorry to do that so publicly.
No, it doesn't matter.
Paragraph 311. The late night refreshment reads as 1:45, but that's wrong.
Yeah, it should be 1:15.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You can't do the activities later than you're allowed to be open to the public, being the councillor's point and mine too.
I did one.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Councillor Easton, for that. Hand over now to the applicants to put forward their reasons for the application and obviously any other mitigating circumstances. Thanks.
So thank you very much. So what I propose to do is to, and mindful of the time, to first of all take you through the written document that was submitted at the end of last week that I think you've all had the opportunity to consider. I am going, if I may, just to canter you through that, and I apologise now for the various racing analogies, but it is Cheltenham Festival week, so I hope you'll forgive me for that. Sorry. And is that a document you've all had the opportunity to see before now? Great. So I will canter you through that. So the first thing then to talk about is the premises. The premises is an existing operation that is set out as a bar, restaurant and delicatessen. You go in off Bridge Street into effectively a large open plan room or rooms, because there are dividers, with a servery and a bar. And then at the rear there is a service, an old Citroen truck that is set up as a service bar. And at the rear of the premises then is a marquee. You'll have seen reference to the marquee and to outside areas throughout the paperwork. For today's purposes, that isn't actually a feature of the application, and I'll come on to explain why. The current licence restricts the operation essentially to 10 p.m. We would like to have hours that would be more commensurate with a bar restaurant, and there are, and I'm sure you're aware, countless examples of premises all along and around us that have some earlier, but some later, but what you would call normal restaurant hours. This is not a pub. Let's just be very clear about that. This is not converting into a pub. There's no application to change the internal configuration and layout of the premises, and any concern you may have that this is a pub application in disguise is respectfully wrong. The delicatessen sells food, sandwiches, pickles, biscuits, pasta, sauces, all the sort of things that you would expect. And I looked at the menu for today: asparagus, bass, beef, cheese and parfait, which, with all due respect to some of the pubs in the vicinity, that's a slightly elevated menu than you might expect, and is a fair window into the soul of the operation. We have had some events in the marquee. We've applied for temporary event notices for those, and I know they're a feature of the resident concerns. We would still like to have some function facilities. They're occasional, and to all intents and purposes, they're not part of today. The application hours are 1:15, everyone out the door, 12:45 for sale of alcohol on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and late night refreshment, which you'll all be familiar with, is the sale of hot food and hot drink, i.e. coffee. I don't know that that's particularly contentious part, but anyway, the hours mirror. The police very helpfully engaged, and they effectively proposed to fully and comprehensively revise the conditions on the licence, and you have been directed toward those by your officer within the report. For a premises of this sort, I would respectfully submit that's a very comprehensive operating schedule, but you don't need to take my word for that. That's the police who have said, and that is contained within Appendix C. The applicant has already suggested conditions to promote the 4 licensing objectives. Gwent Police would advocate the rewording of some of the proposed conditions and advocate a small number of additional conditions that would support the applicant in the promotion of the licensing objectives. So let's be very clear. The police say this is a good application, and we have agreed both the reduction of hours and all of the conditions. Environmental Health then say, if you're going to have entertainment, we would like to see a couple of conditions attached, and we'd like to see the hours moderated, which we also agreed with entirely. In due course, we then received resident representations, and I will just make some comments about those in a moment. But what essentially has happened is, through your licensing service, a mediation process has been engaged with, where we have effectively said, well, what if we give up this? And the applicants have said, the objectors said, no good to us. Then we've given up something else. We gave up originally hours, then we gave up entertainment, then we gave up all of the outside area. And at each turn, the objectors have said thanks, but no thanks. And I do ask you to reflect on that when you come to retire, as to the reasonable way in which the applicant has approached this. There's some reference, perhaps for the benefit of your legal officer, on the national guidance that's contained within the document, but I will read it because I do say it is very significant that no responsible authorities are involved. Each responsible authority will be an expert in their respective field, and in some cases it is likely a particular responsible authority will be the licensing authority's main source of advice in relation to a particular licensing objective. For example, the police have a key role in managing the nighttime economy and should have good working relationships with those operating in their local area. The police should usually therefore be the licensing authority's main source of advice on matters relating to the promotion of the crime and disorder objective. I've quoted you your policy. I'm not going to patronise you by reading your own policy, but each application on its individual merits and so forth. And what we say at the end of those submissions is no application is without risk. We appreciate that, and it is touched on in the representations which are at Appendix D, where For example, there is reference to the possibility that such events could, in theory, that's representation 2. If the test here was that there was the possibility that something negative could happen in theory, then frankly there'd be no point submitting an application, because that would be true of every single licensed premises in the entire country. Every licensed premises could, in theory, have an issue. Licensing is, I'd suggest, about balance, about proportionality, about being reasonable. And I courteously say that can't fairly be the way in which these representations are interpreted. A couple of quick points from your report, please. Just to reference paragraph 3.8 as it's numbered over the second page, that we are in the central shopping area. And you will be familiar with your own policies about maintaining vitality, attractiveness and viability of such centres. This is, we say, perfectly good business, and it is having a measured development. And the only thing that is constant is change. This is not so disproportionate as to throw it out of kilter with us in any way. And then in terms of Appendix D, the representations, couple of quick comments. The first representation starts with, we don't have an issue with the sale of alcohol within the limits of the building. And the representation can fairly be said to be about the marquee. The second representation says, well, as I've touched on, the possibility that such events could in theory take place. The third representation, which I anticipate is from the attendee today, it'll be for the gentleman to speak to that. But even at the bullet point number 5, there's no issue with the licence covering the building, as this is insulated with doors and windows that can be closed, notwithstanding that the conclusion is that the licence shouldn't be granted beyond 10 p.m. We appreciate that the commercial reality in which the premises finds itself is of no particular concern to the licensing committee, but we need a sustainable business to continue to provide the services we provide to very good effect. Flawless effect? No. Absolutely. It's going to be said undoubtedly that the event on the 29th of December was a bit noisy. And if it was, then we apologise for that. We've just heard, I think, a recording, and when you've heard the recording, as I'm sure you have, you'll also hear the footsteps on the gravel, which might tell you something about the degree to which the... Sorry,
just to interrupt, I haven't provided the recording because it was submitted to Environmental Health, and she's the expert, so she was the one who dealt with the recording and the noise issue, so the members haven't heard that.
Well, forgive me. There was a recording, but candidly, I'll finish on this point. If that's been provided to Environmental Health, and Environmental Health have chosen not to engage in this process, that might very well tell you something about the recording itself. And anyway, the point is this. The 3 representations are received from a fairly decent residential community in the vicinity that significantly numbers more than 3 who have not chosen to object. And the 3 representations predominantly talk about their anxieties about the marquee, no part of today, the outside area, no part of today, and change, and the possibility of difficulties arising. There is nothing that we can do that will accommodate these representations, I'm afraid. We have tried. 3 times we have moderated our application to no effect as far as the representations are concerned. But that the officers have said, this is fine with us. I would ask you to weigh that in significant balance when you come to retire. I'm sorry if I'm a minute or 2 over.
No, that's fine. Thanks for that, Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. And just to be clear, we'll go now to the one objector who's actually in the chamber today, and obviously you'll have the same time. But just to be crystal clear, what we're considering today is purely the extension of the licensing hours within the building. We're not talking about the marquee or outside, we're talking about within the premises.
So if it helps, there is a plan at the back of the, for want of a better phrase, a plan at the back of the licence, which is page 9 of the licence, which is Appendix A brackets 2 in your report. And that's what we're talking about.
Could I just, am I allowed to just have a clarification on that? Because it is significant to what I will be saying.
Well, we're actually, now that we've heard the applicant's case, which has obviously been put forward, I was going to come to you now, and you have 10 minutes, and obviously if you want to pick up on anything.
Just before I start my present, I just want a few clarifications, because I have found this very difficult, and I've just a clarification from, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, Mr. Phipps? Matthew. When you say it's within the building itself, and this is just on the building, are you telling me that after a certain hour, nothing will be going on in the marquee?
No, I'm not.
Right. Okay. That's. Okay.
I'm saying the applications about the building, but the areas for consumption of alcohol are not.
Sorry, the what? The consumption of alcohol.
Are you happy for me to?
Yes, carry on if you want to respond.
So there is an application for the licence which originally sought to incorporate all of the outside space, including a marquee that is in situ at the rear. And effectively, in trying to accommodate the representors, we changed the hours, added the conditions, withdrew the entertainment, and then withdrew the outside space. And the outside space is, to all intents and purposes, the marquee at the rear. And so that is not part of today's application. If you're minded to grant the application today, which I think is the point you're getting to, then we have an off-sales permission, so you'll be entitled to go into the marquee and you can consume your drink in there just as you can anywhere if you're minded to grant it. But it will not be part of the licensed premises. Is that the right answer? Is that not the right answer?
Yes, so people will still be in the marquee drinking. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Correct. Yeah, before you start, just to be absolutely clear, the way that I understand it now, this application is for the building, the licensed premises, for the sale of alcohol, and with an extension of those hours, which is in the application. But people obviously may, if they wish, they'll purchase alcohol within the licensed premises. But if the weather's not inclement, they might wander out there and consume what they've bought in the licensed premises. But they might go to the rear of the building from looking at the photographs and the plan, and they might be in the marquee. But they will not be buying any alcohol, purchasing any alcohol in the marquee.
That's exactly it.
Okay, right, thanks. So that's clarified. That hand over now. We've had the 3 written objections. Obviously, welcome you to this meeting. The one objector who's come along. So, let's say I'll give you 10 minutes or so. If you go slightly over, I'm not going to argue with that. But if you now want to put your particular point of view, which is, I think, is it number 3 in the pack? Yes. So I'll hand over to you now then. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity of addressing you today and allowing me to give some input into the licensing process, which, to be honest, I have found actually quite difficult, especially with all the changes that have been taking place. At this point, I'd like to make my position clear. I'm certainly not against 57 as a business. In fact, I use it regularly, and so do my family. And I think, as I said in my presentation, I have no problem what goes on in the building itself. My concern relates specifically to the car park and marquee, and what will go on in the building will also take place within the marquee. As we've just heard, they will be able to go in there at the hours until opening hours to go into the marquee. I'm sure you've read my representation, so I'm not going to go through that. Just as a bit of background, I live in a property that joins the car park of the Marquee at 57. It's 600 years old. It's a Grade 2 listed building. It has less insulation than modern buildings, no bubble glazing, which due to the listing we're not able to alter. Many nearby properties are the same, which makes us unique and why it's happy for us to be custodians of the house. And we live in the garden, and it's less than 10 metres from the Marquee. The Marquee has no insulation, so we can hear everything that goes on in the Marquee. At times, we can even join in people's discussions. The license application will really affect the use of our home and our well-being, with the proposed opening hours of a certain days increased from 10:30 to 1:15. Alcohol sales from 10 to 1:15 on the weekends and 12 in the week. As we know, when people drink, they get louder and louder, and especially after the 10 o'clock period, they get even louder. The applicant's submission claims that the Marquee will be acting as a secondary facility to the main building. However, the majority of the time, the Marquee is the primary location for customers. If granted, this license will enable the activity in the Marquee to go late into the night due to the extended hours. And again, as we go into the night, people drink and noise gets louder. Under the main operation, the applicant's submission sets out that other establishments have longer licensing hours. However, there's a significant difference in the construction of the other establishments. The Marquee is uninsulated compared to others and of traditional construction. And the Marquee, although the front of 57 is in with a commercial district, the rear of 57 is in a predominantly residential location. The applicant's submission says that the main driver is to allow the operation to trade in the evenings as a deli restaurant with food and drinks available in this. Is this really the main driver until 2 o'clock in the morning? The applicant's submission states that the premises does not have the same licensing hours compared to a similar premises in Usk. If the primary driver is to increase in the restaurant sales, then the hours should be compared with other restaurants in Usk. For instance, Casabianca and the Wallace, the last table booking, as I looked today, is 10 p.m. The Three Salmons, the last booking is 8:30. The Mad Platter, the Castle Inn, Cross Keys, 8 o'clock. The Nag's Head, 8:30. The King's Head, 8 o'clock. The New Court, 8 p.m. And on Sundays, the last booking are a lot earlier. So are we looking at a restaurant as the main driver, where such hours are not required, or a late night drinking venue? The applicant's submission states that if granted, the license will allow the business, and this amazes me, to conduct functions without the necessity of applying for a TENS, where the attendees' details will be known by the license holder or the organiser. I'm not sure where this comes from, as the licensing officer has never brought this to anyone's attention. Usk is a small town. I'm sure the organisers will be able to have regular events with people they know. Surely this cannot happen. This type of event is likely to take place in the Marquee and its associated disturbance. The submissions mentions that outside regulated entertainment has been withdrawn. This has really confused me and the others who initially made representations. Regulated music, as you know, is defined amongst other things as such as live music, including karaoke and recorded music, open to the public and arranged by someone trying to make a profit. However, under the 2003 Live Music Act, amplified and live music can be accommodated between 8 and 23 on the premises, which is authorised to sell alcohol for consumption on the premises. So with the extending hours, this would affect us until 11 p.m. I can assure you that others who made initial representation were not advised of this, so thought that no music was taking place in the Marquee and withdrew their representations. Within the submission, the applicant says that changes perhaps in licence terms, as in life, the only constants. We ourselves have seen and embraced change. 57, when we purchased the house, was the National Westminster Bank. And in 2018, we embraced the change of the bank to the bistro. What we did not embrace was the erection of a marquee and now the possibility of a late-night venue. This brings me on to planning. And I've been advised by the licensing office that I could not link planning to the licensing application. I must admit I found this strange, as without planning in the first place, there'd be nothing to give a license for. And especially in this case, with the planning for the marquee, although the licensing officer says no planning is required, that has been changed because initially we were told by the planners that there was a 4-year rule, that anything that occurred after 4 years would be taken into account. This is a listed building, so that is not the case. Where planning for the marquee is in question, and there may, in my opinion, question over whether the car park can be considered as a beer garden. This is important due to the 203 licensing, which is relevant when looking at the 203 Music Act. In April 2018, planning was granted of change of use of the ground floor only from A2 to A1, A2 and A3. The relevant point is that the description within the planning permission was for the ground floor only, and within the planning officer's report for this application, it states that the property has an existing car park where there will be no changes to access or parking. Not as we were later advised, a beer garden. In March 2020, there was another planning application for the first floor of 57. Again, in the officer's planning report, there was a reference to the car park at the rear, not a beer garden. The relevance is because it determines what the car park should be used for. The planning officer advised me that the red line goes around the whole site and therefore the car park can be used for A3 use. I contest this as the red line in the planning permission was for identification purposes only. And from the previous planning applications, there is a definite reference to it being a car park. One can turn a piece of ground into a beer garden, but my planning consultant has advised me that as soon as you put anything on that piece of land, such as tables, chairs, planning, or a marquee, planning may be required. The relevance of this is that the 2003 Music Act should not be attributed to the car park, as it is not a beer garden and where the marquee is located. With view to the original license, the ground floor of the building is the area associated with the license, and the car park I'll go that more slowly. When viewing the original license, the ground floor of the building is the area associated with the license, and the car park was specifically excluded, which reinforces my above point. The applicant's submission and the response to the representation to me suggest that very little consideration has been given to those living in the area with reference to the public nuisance, especially noise. There has been no offer of any mitigation, no decibel levels, there's no insulation of the marquee, acoustic curtains, no detail of the noise management plan. If one looks at the Monmouthshire licensing report on the Crown at Pantigatelli, the report states that the applicant there has not satisfactorily addressed how they will limit any noise impact implications for the neighbouring properties. In my view, the same applies in this case, and no consideration has been offered for either the main licence or the future TENS. The submission also makes very sweeping statements, such as that residents in the proximity to the premises, but licensed premises are in proximity to residents countrywide. However, not in uninsulated marquee in a rural town where housing is in such proximity, and not where one can be so detrimental to the whole environment. Why should we and those in the vicinity have to give up their quiet enjoyment of their homes because, as the submission has said, a business which was bought only in October needs the extra hours because it was bought, and restricts the ability for the business to be financially viable? Surely the business plan hasn't changed that much in 5 months. In summary, I would not have such an issue with what takes place solely in the building. I am advised that I cannot have one without the other, and the issue is the uninsulated marquee, possibly every night of the week until early hours of the morning. I urge the licensing authority to consider the negative impact of this application on the local well-being. I leave you with a recording taken from my property on the 29th of December, and by the way, Matthew, we do not have any gravel in our garden, and therefore you won't hear any gravel. So I don't know what you were insinuating. I leave you, which I believe highlights some of my concerns and also answers the licensing officer's comment to me, which was made at the outset of this, where she told me that the extra hours should not be of concern because we would not be using the garden after 10 at night.
Okay. Thanks for that. Obviously, I've allowed you there sort of 15 minutes. You've obviously put, your objections, comprehensively to us.
Sorry, can I just play you? This is from my garden.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought this hadn't gone to the committee.
Sorry, if I just intervene.
It's relevant to the fact that they can have parties without having attendance.
I have to stop that.
Sorry, if you could stop the recording, please. I think, first of all, that recording hasn't been provided to the.
It has. It was provided to the licensing officer.
Okay.
Yes, but it hasn't been provided. If I can just interject now. I've given you 15 minutes now to put your objections. You're now bringing in evidence that we as a committee haven't heard. It's gone to the environmental health officer responsible, and they've made a decision that it is not above an unreasonable level.
Sorry, could I? We have had correspondence from the environmental health. They have sent us all the people who originally made representations and others have received a log to be made when these when events take place within the building. The recording was sent to the licensing officer, and I'm sorry that you haven't heard it.
Okay. Stop you there now. Yeah, can I bring in licensing now, please?
Yes, of course. I did get a copy of the recording, but as I said before, it's up for environmental health. They're the professionals, they're the experts. The environmental health officer dealt with it, and she provided the conditions which would have taken into consideration the objections' representation. I've also got some additional information that I went to the environmental health officer just to get some information, just to see how many complaints have been received, because of course she wasn't going to be attending because she's got nothing to attend for. And there were 4 complaints, but they were all received after the variation application had been made. And yes, everybody who's made a complaint will get a standard procedure. Am I correct in that? Yeah. They will get a form sent to them and say, can you just monitor? That's standard procedure to anybody. But the noise recording was dealt with by the environmental health officer, who is the person who deals with noise. Bringing that here, I don't know what background you've got in noise, if you know what decibels are or whatever, but the environmental health officer does. She had that with the objection, and she's the one who then gave us the conditions to add, which then the applicant agreed to.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Can I just confirm, has that noise recording been provided to the applicant?
Yes, the applicant has seen it, yeah.
Okay, and has the applicant and yourself verified the date and time that the recording was taken?
I don't believe it's possible to verify the date and time, or to verify it came from where it was. It was done on the objector's phone. I've got no background in that to be able to confirm if it was done on the date or the time it was done, sorry.
It is on the recording.
The date and time is on the recording?
Can I just highlight as well that the objector's bringing in planning, and I've said time and time again that planning and the planning issues are not something for licensing. The planning officer that actually gave the comments on the report is Phil Thomas, who's head of planning. So everything that's been written in here is from the head of planning. So I understand that the objector doesn't agree with it, but that's from the head of planning. So if he's saying that they don't require planning permission for that marquee, then they don't require planning permission for that marquee.
But you have said that this...
Okay, hang on now. You can't interject now. We're in a formal meeting, and I don't want this to break down into a conversation. So, yes, if you've got briefly, if you've got some objection to that, but it must be brief. Thanks.
Even in the report, it says that the Heritage is looking into the planning permission.
Okay, thanks. But, to all intents and purposes this morning, I am chair of licensing and regulatory. I am not chair of the planning committee. I have no expertise in that. But this committee here today is to look at the licensing issue. It's not a planning issue. It is a licensing issue. And what we have to consider today is this a reasonable application in terms of the premises and obviously the effect on people surrounding. Obviously, we've published the statutory notices and people have objected, and obviously you've had time to give your point of view today, as has the applicant. But I think we must be very clear. It is not a planning issue about is the marquee permissible, etc. It is about the licensing of the physical building where you have a restaurant, but you also have a bar and the sale of alcohol, and we're considering an extension on those hours. So I think we have to be very, very clear about that today. It's not about the marquee or anything outside that building. But obviously you've made that point. In terms of the written objections, I don't propose reading through them. Everybody obviously had the papers beforehand. There are two other objectors who put in written objections, and we've obviously, as a committee, yes, we've read those and we've had time to consider them, and that will be part of our deliberation when we go into a separate room in a few minutes to actually decide on what actually for us to actually make our decision. And obviously we have to weigh that evidence, and obviously we have legal advice here as well. Julian Saunders, the solicitor, will be with us and will obviously be able to advise us in terms of what we actually decide upon. Yeah, sorry, I'll bring in Julian, sorry.
It's just to come back to you in regards to the planning permission for the marquee that you refer to. On page 4 of the report, it's halfway down roughly. So it is confirmed there in that report that it says, having said this, the council's heritage team has written to the business owner of number 57 to advise that the marquee needs listed building consent. That is a separate consent process to planning permission. So ultimately, what planning is saying there is that if the marquee doesn't achieve that planning listed planning consent, that marquee. A separate application to the licence. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for that, Mr. Saunders. Bring in Councillor Tony Easton. I wanted to bring up an issue or a question.
Hello, yes, good morning. First of all, I know nothing about anything going to planning about this particular building or anything. I am a member of the planning committee, so I declare a personal interest rather than a prejudicial interest. I know nothing about any applications, but just to make that clear. I did read in the report certain aspects going forward. I've also read in the reports that the basic reason for this application coming forward was to prevent or stop the need for keep applying for TENS licences during the year. It was taken over in October 24, this property. In the last 12-18 months, how many TENS licences have been applied for in Usk? And has this building been, or well, you know, what's the prevalence of applications in Usk for Tens licences? Because that seems to be the main thrust of this application. It would prevent the need to keep asking for Tens licences. Is that a concern? And is it a... are there requests very often in Usk for Tens licences?
When you say Usk, do you mean Bridge Street or just in the vicinity of 57 Bridge Street? Because Usk is quite general.
General, really. 57 Bridge Street is a specific, but you've got a few little restaurants around the area.
So Bridge Street.
Bridge Street, yeah, Bridge Street. Is it a concern that? Wrong word, concern, but is it something you have to deal with the Tens licences? Sorry.
Right, sorry, yeah. We don't actually process the Tens licences. Our admin does that for us, but I know that there are a lot of Tens applied for a premises which is behind the gentleman's house, which is on the main car park. And they apply for Tens and they go to like 3 o'clock in the morning. But we don't have many Tens from any of the other premises because they've all got licensing hours that they don't require any extra.
Okay, thanks.
Forgive me.
Yes.
Do you mind if I just add something to that? Because I think, and to be fair, there was a point raised that it merits just clarification. The predominant reason for the application at the time of the submission of the application and the predominant reason for the application today are slightly different in reality. When we first applied, the outside area, which is defined as the marquee, which is a conversation for another day, was part of the application. And if the application had been granted to include the outside area, there would have been no requirement to apply for Tens. The outside area, the marquee, is not now part of the application, and therefore actually that's wrong, to be fair. And I have caused that confusion because we will need to apply for Tens if we want to sell alcohol or have any entertainment within the marquee. So because the marquee is no longer part of this application. If I just will slightly explain myself as to where that confusion came from, for which I apologise. When I understood that we had withdrawn the outside area, the penny didn't drop that meant the marquee, because I'm afraid I took the view that the marquee meant inside. And you can't smoke in a marquee, you can't smoke inside. In COVID, you couldn't go in a marquee, you had to be outside, etc., etc. But to be fair, Samantha and I have spoken, the view has been consistently throughout the application process that the marquee is to be treated for these purposes as outside. So, Councillor Easton, in answer to your question, it is fair to flag that we will need to apply for Tens, and so whatever the rationale was at the start, it's about the building now, it's not about, if you will, the marquee, and if we do have later night functions in the marquee, we'll need to apply for a temporary event notice.
Okay.
But can I just clarify again, I did mention it earlier on, but this if today we can either grant the licence or not grant the licence, but if the licence is granted after discussion, I did ask it earlier on, but will people still be able to purchase alcohol in the premises, in the physical building, but then wander out and consume alcohol in the marquee, and obviously there might be a little bit of associated noise, etc. But just to be clear.
Yes is the only straight answer to the straight question. The marquee is there. There are doors that lead into the marquee. In cold, inclement weather, marquee's not available. As we move into the summer, the marquee will be more available. So yes, if, for example, if our tables were full in the primary premises, it's an additional runoff space. I think the only fair answer to give you is yes.
Can I just say as well, Councillor, that the consumption of alcohol isn't licensable. So drinking it, they don't need a licence for it. So that area doesn't need to be licensed because they're just consuming, there's no sale taking place in there.
Yeah, so to be absolutely clear, alcohol is not going to be sold in the marquee, but alcohol can be, people can wander out on a pleasant evening with a glass of wine or a pint of beer and then go into the marquee with their family or friends and consume it.
Absolutely right.
Okay, thanks. Can I go now then to Councillor Dale Rook, please?
Thanks, Chair. You've pretty much asked my question, whether the marquee was going to be used for consumption of alcohol. In that kind of leads me on to a next question as why has this been amended to take out the marquee when, for all intents and purposes, it's still going to be used for the consumption of alcohol?
So yes, let me help with that. The difference is, we say unashamedly, significant, and was done in order to endeavour to accommodate the objectors. The original application sought to permit the sale of alcohol out there. It sought to permit there to be entertainment out there. All of that's been withdrawn. So I don't think, and never easy to say no to a committee member, but I don't think it's a fair analogy to say that consumption is anything like what was first applied for. So we took it out believing that it was the right thing to do. We took it out believing that it would accommodate or may accommodate some of the concerns. It did from the police and the environmental health officers' point of view. It didn't from these three objectors. It's the best I've got for you.
Okay, thanks. Can I just ask, and I know premises are allowed to play music that is not amplified, etc., but are we right in thinking that the marquee, if this licence is granted, that it will only be used for the consumption of alcohol? It won't have karaoke or people playing live music in there in sort of normal opening times, and particularly if this extension is granted?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that answer, and I will have, if I step out of line here, Samantha just correct me as it's a sort of legal query. The first point is that until 11 o'clock, any premises can put on live and recorded music. And that's because the government has said that before 11 o'clock it's not a regulated activity about which they have any concern. If you cock it up, and forgive the language, if you make a mess of putting on music, then there is a provision within the legislation to effectively take that off you or to impose conditions that control that. But every single licensed premises in the country has that permission. There's nothing extraordinary about that. But after 11, no, there will be nothing, because you wouldn't be permitted it because we withdrew all of that from our first application. So until 11, it's fair to say the answer is yes. But then that's true of every single licensed premises in the entire country, save where it's been removed because they made a mess of it. I am looking at Samantha. Is that, I know that this is a submission, but is that a fair interpretation?
Yeah, I was just about to say as well. So every premises is allowed to have it until 11, and the only way to get conditions put on is by a review. So they would have to be really bad to get to the point where we got to a review, because the licensing authority like to work with applicants, and we would ask them to do certain things. So everybody's got that right, and the only time that right can be taken away is either by a review, which would be coming from one of the RAs or from a member of the public.
Okay, thanks. I think that that clarifies it. Before we go into the sort of summing up element, I'll bring in Julian Saunders now, solicitor.
My apologies. I just need to confirm one point. It's in regards to the playing of the sound recording by the objector. So I understand that's been sent to the applicant. Does the applicant agree or disagree that that sound recording should be included in today's deliberations? And secondly, do you agree that that sound recording was of your premises at a certain time and date?
So, in answer to the second question, I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm just not saying it was. I've no idea. I've not seen anything about that. In terms of the sound recording, I think it's already been played. Just after the representative said, "May I play it?" I think he hit play. Yeah. And so it's a bit late. The horses have long left the stable would be the only fair answer to that. So of course I don't have any objection. But I'm bound to say I will be referring you to, in my closing remarks, to the comments from your licensing officer. We don't know anything about where it's from, when it was from. It's been sent to Environmental Health, and they've taken the decision that there's no further action arising. So, for what it's worth, yes, of course you can hear it, but it isn't worth much, is what I'm going to say.
Okay, thanks for that. I take it now that there are no further sort of comments, questions from my colleagues on the committee or anybody else. We'll go now then to closing statements. And normally, if the responsible authorities were present, if they'd made objections, then they obviously would have the opportunity to sum up. But they are not present, and from what I've seen in the written submissions to the authorities, they are now, for want of a better word, happy, or their conditions have been met. I'll go now then to...
Councillor, I'm sorry to interrupt you again.
Yes.
I just want to say about the recording.
Yes, go on.
It wasn't submitted before the time was up for representations to come. Mr Webb sent it to me on the 10th of February, and it was attached as a further amended. The representation just kept getting amended and amended and amended. So it wasn't actually submitted before the representation date was out.
Right.
To me.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, so thanks for clarifying that. So it wasn't within the time limit. We're going to have the summing up now, and you know, I've been fairly sort of lenient in terms of time allocation, but in summing up now, it must be fairly brief, and I would say 3 or 4 minutes, 5 at the outside. But we'll go to the objector, the one objector that we have, and then we'll come to the applicant for the final summing up. At the end of that, we will then go into a separate room to deliberate and obviously reach a decision. We'll come back and give the decision, and we will obviously have to give reasons as to why we are either granting the licence or we're not granting the licence. So that, and there is obviously opportunity for people to look into object that.
You've got to keep dealing with this.
Yes. Okay. So we'll go now then to the objector, please. If you want to just briefly sum up, you know, what your real concerns are. I know you gave them fairly comprehensively, but is there anything else you want to say now to sum up?
I think I've made most of my points. I think the issue is the noise element. At the moment, closing is basically at 10 o'clock, and suddenly it's going from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock and 1:15. To me, if it was totally within the building, doors and windows shut, after 11 o'clock, fine. But the problem we have is that it's going to go into it will go into the marquee. And, you know, would you all like to be next door to a noisy building the way you live? And we do have a big garden. We have a nice garden. We sit out there in the summer, even though the officer said that I don't. Or I shouldn't, after 10 o'clock. You said that to me verbally, by the way. I do believe that...
I don't think I can sort of allow that, really, because, you know, you're sort of saying, you know, giving hearsay, you know, nothing's been said.
Yeah, sorry, it's hearsay.
And this is what we're considering, yeah. And obviously the written evidence, so I think you've got to withdraw that.
Sorry, I withdraw that. And that's my main concern. It's the fact that we have something next door going on until very early hours in the morning. If you could take it, if you could stop it going on within the marquee, fine. But as long as it remained in the building with windows and doors shut, it's the marquee, as you can tell, is the issue, and what goes on that to early hours of the morning.
Okay, thank you for that. You obviously, expressed your views in the main body of the meeting, and now obviously in this summing up stage, we understand what your objections are. Can we go to the applicant now then, and just a brief summing up in terms of reasons for why you believe the application should go ahead?
So yes, I hope fairly to flag, I'll just be slightly longer than the comments just made, which I hope will balance us up in terms of time over the course of the day, because I would like just to respond to some of the points that were brought up in the representation before I really get to the nub of the conclusion. So a couple of just quick points. The comment about the area being predominantly residential, I'll ask you to have a look at that. It's referenced in your report, and I make two comments about that. Builders, merchants, car parks, open space, and you've got a Google Earth plan in your papers. But even if I'm simply wrong, and I don't pretend that I would know Usk as well as others in the room, if it is predominantly residential, where are all the other residents? You've got 3 people, one of whom's garden effectively abuts our garden, and I'd ask you to have a thought on that. Second thing is that there's reference to today, not in the representation, the last table booking times for a variety of licensed premises in Usk. We're not here to discuss last table booking times. We're here to discuss what time is the premises legitimately licensed until. Every licensed premises in the country can have live music until 11 p.m. We know not every licensed premises has live music every night of the week, 7 nights a week between 10 a.m. in the morning and 11 p.m. at night. So the last table booking is respectfully utterly irrelevant. It's what time, if you want to consider anything, and it should be each application on its individual merits, but if you want to consider anything, what time are the various premises licensed to on Bridge Street and in or around Usk? And for the sake of an observation, but I'll stand corrected, broadly it's in line with what we are applying for. I'm happy to take the point about clarification for 10s, and I've already touched on that with your colleague Councillor Eason. If we want to put on an event in the marquee, we need a 10 because of the designation outside area. Reference to we've made no offer, we've offered no mitigation. I'm afraid that's completely unfair. Time and time again, we have gone back through your licensing service in order to try to mediate a successful solution which has been rebuffed by these residents on each and every occasion, not by the officers who effectively say, good for you, thanks, etc. There's reference then made to other premises. I'm afraid I missed the name of the premises, but this is each application on its individual merits. Other premises are of no consequence. Planning we've probably done to death, but the simple point is, A, planning is not licensing. The national guidance, I'm sure Mr. Sanders is familiar, effectively says planning and licensing are not quite oil and water, but something pretty close to it. And then it turns out it doesn't require planning application in any event. A building control application needs to be made. That's been made. We don't have an answer to that yet. Reference is then made to the possibility of concerns, and I've made the comments in the representation. It is, and sorry to be so bold about this, the way in which this has been presented in objection today is to catastrophize this application. It is to make presumptions that the worst of everything will arise. And yet at the same time, everybody keeps saying, in the written representations and orally today, I don't have any problem with the building. So the building's, as far as I can see, not a point of objection, and so I'm not going to address you on that because I don't think anybody's objecting to it. Where we end up with is the marquee from which we've withdrawn all licensable activities, but we have the runoff consumption issue that Councillor Dale fairly raised. I'm sorry that this is sort of practically the last thing I'm saying, but having heard what's been said today, can I make a suggestion? Then why don't we cut the marquee off at 12 for consumption? That's not what we want. Just to be very clear, it is not what we want, nor do we think that it is legitimate. We believe we could perfectly properly run this to the hours that we have applied for. But if we're no longer arguing about entertainment, we're no longer arguing about the hours for the building, we're no longer arguing about the building itself, we're no longer arguing about licensable activities, then licensing is about being reasonable and proportionate. And the thought strikes me that I know that respectfully, that won't necessarily be agreed by the objector, who still wants the premises to close at 10, but that may say something respectfully about the objector more than it does about the application. Then call it quits at midnight. We will have to manage that carefully, which we would have had to have done in any event. And so that no one is hoodwinked here, then if it works, we may review that in the fullness of time. And just from the point of view of the legal position, you can grant the application, you can refuse the application, but also you can grant the application and attach such conditions as you see fit. So a condition that would say that the marquee would be vacated at midnight is perfectly within the purview of the licensing committee. There's nothing inappropriate about that at all. I finish with this point. If you conclude that the existing application risks undermining the licensing objectives, our position is we can do this perfectly properly, and the police and environmental health both say we can do this perfectly properly to the hours applied for. But if you're against me on that, don't refuse my application. Have a look at midnight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. We will go into deliberation shortly, but can I just ask the objector who's present? Obviously, there are two other objectors who are not here, so I can't ask them. But what would your view be if that particular condition, because we can't change the licensing application is the licensing application we've had today, so we can't, in a sense, change things on the hoof, as it were. But as you rightly say, we can attach conditions, but what would the objector think of that proposal?
Where you said 10 o'clock, and it's more of the applicant than me. The reason I said 10 o'clock was because the original license was still 10 o'clock. I think that's a reasonable offer. If you could make it 11:30, that would be a better improvement.
Okay, I don't think we can go into sort of an auction of times now, to be honest, but, you know, we hear what you're saying. I think, you know, we've listened, we've looked at this application, I think, in some detail today and listened, you know, to both sides and to licensing views and the other responsible authorities. So I'm going to stop at this point now, and we will go into a separate room for discussion and then come back and give our decision, and as I say, with a rationale for that particular decision. And if we decide to attach conditions, those would be attached as well. So we'll stop at this point.
So I make a suggestion. It's a matter for you, not a matter for... Oh, no, too late. I was going to say, do you want us to leave and you could carry on the Teams call that you've already got set up?
We've got Wendy here who will, can bring in the other councillor. So if you stay here, we'll go out and then...
So there's to be no consumption of alcohol after 12 p.m. in the outside space, which includes the footprint of the marquee.
Forgive the pedantic nature of this next point, but your solicitor, I hope, will respect it, because that's what we're here for. I think it's 12 a.m., not
Sorry.
12 p.m.
I'm glad you made that point now, not me. Thanks.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for your inputs today and for your patience and discussion. I declare the meeting now closed.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Julian. Thanks.